welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price.
And I'm Eric.
And this is March Smashness, the Gauntlet. We're back for our second year, bigger than ever, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I don't know about you, but I am so excited.
Yeah, there's a lot of great pairings. We're putting the best combos together.
Right. There's a lot of feedback after last year. People are excited. There were a couple of things that people wanted to see differently. We also took a different approach just as far as how we constructed the teams. More of those details are going to be revealed at the end of the month in our last video on March Smashness coverage, but today we wanted to start revealing the seeds. We're going to reveal them over 4 videos, 8 at a time. For those who aren't as familiar with March Smashness or the idea of a bracket, there may be a little bit of terminology that you need to get used to. Is there anything you want to explain about, what it means to be a seed or a bracket?
So seeds are where a faction or factions fit within the bracket itself. And the seeds are determined by a panel. Last year we had
7 people.
7 people. This year we have 11. Hopefully this will help reduce the deviation between the appearance and actuality.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is Kaiju Innsmouth.
Right.
Which has been talked about extensively. They were the number 32 seed, and someone, I'm not going to say who, ranked them 8th, which was a great deviation, but they were so disliked by everyone else that they were still the 32nd seed, and they went on to win it. Now, how does that happen? Obviously, matchups played a role, but the general consensus is that they shouldn't have been a 32 seed, and that's why we revamped the process a lot, and hopefully that will lead to better results. We'll talk more about that in a second, but let's talk about what it means to be in a bracket.
Well, actually, I want to go back to the
Sure.
Kaiju Innsmouth real quick. And actually, just like in any sports events, when you see a team perform and play, you actually learn more about them. So it actually makes sense that they get seeded differently this year because people are more aware of their abilities and what they can do.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the process of bracketing, going through it.
Okay, so for brackets, we have 4 quadrants. And we pair the first with the 32nd and second with 31st and so on and so forth.
Right, so if you're trying to follow Home Alone, when you start seeing the seeds, basically for the first round, add up 2 numbers that add up to 33. So as you said, 1 and 32, 2 and 31. That's how you'll know who they'll be facing in the first round.
And after that, all bets are off.
Right. So brackets. Right. So when once you align the initial seeds that way, the winner is going to advance. And then they're going to advance in such a way that they will add up to the next power of 2 plus 1. So in a typical bracket, 1 and 32 would face off, and then in last year's case, 32-1. Then you're going to go to the next year, to the next bracket round, and you're going to see, all right, who's going to face? And typically, it should add up to 17. So 8 and 9 would face each other. 1 and 16 would face each other because that adds up to 17. But if 32 wins, 32 needs to take the spot that it beat. So 16 and 17 play, and 1 and 32 play. So if 16 beats 17, and then 1 beats and 32 beats 1, you have to treat 32 like it's 1 in order to still make sure that the numbers add up to 17. It's going to be a little bit hard to talk about until you actually see the bracket, which is why we're showing you this in advance. For the people who aren't as familiar with basketball, the origin of March Smashes comes from March Madness with basketball and the big college tournament, but this is the Smash It version, and there's going to be some slight differences with that.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the process. As Eric mentioned, we added 11 people. We added up to 11 people. Everyone from last year returned, and then there were 4 new additions, who are all great people who I've worked with throughout the year in different capacities. Some are fans, some are play testers, but we wanted to get as many perspectives as possible, and whenever possible, we try to limit within the same group of people because groups tend to form their own metas, and they have their own different biases. But there's overlap. So Turing Jedi is part of our group, and Blackjack is part of Chucky Cookie's group. So last year it was strictly based on average, and shame on me because that's a terrible, terrible way to decide on things. So knowing that was going to be the case, we started the process earlier. Admittedly, we did not have as much time as we would have liked. There were some other commitments, many Smash Up related, that got in the way and kind of made it so that things had to be expedited, but there was still a very large amount of time that went into determining this.
Plus, because we wanted to get started earlier on all the recordings so that you all have more content to watch, we had to push up the schedule to the left.
Yeah, very much. That's a great point. So there were the initial impressions, and that forms a basis for seeds, but that's not how they're actually going to be played. Then there were the exhibition games that were played by Crank It Up and by many other playtesting committee panel as well. There were probably about 50 exhibition games or more that went into factoring this to see how things actually play. Because someone can say, my gut reaction is that I don't like this team, and then they play them and they may say, yeah, I was right, or yeah, I was wrong. And things can play out in a number of circumstances. There's also a little bit of data mining, which we'll talk about when it's relevant, to see, okay, if someone's last, why are they last? Or if two people are close, is there something in the numbers that we're seeing? Like, is there a consensus? Is there a lot of deviation? Those could be things that we need to look at carefully, and very often the deviation would drive who needs an exhibition game. And finally, there had to be a little bit of manual adjustment just because sometimes, the numbers aren't everything. Sometimes someone can be skewing the results in either direction. And so whether it's me making the tough call as to, I think that they belong here, you're going to see over the course of the videos that there are many things where I'm just flat out wrong. People bring up good points, and then when they bring up those points, there's a lot of group discussion as well. When people bring up those points, I would say, like, I understand what you're saying, and we're going to go with that. So you're going to see all the VAR input from the 11 people. You're also going to see the original seed before the adjustment. Know that final 12th number is not the final story, which is why we did so much to actually make this a little bit more accurate. Anything else we want to say about the process before we begin?
No, I think we're ready to start.
All right.
Number 32, Tornados Mounties. This is a faction that plays well against other opponents, and it's critical to have your minions where they want to be when you need them to be there on a particular basis. And their tornadoes will allow them to move into those positions well.
And also moving the opposing minions as well.
Right.
So it's a little sad to see them at 32 because I do like them. I ranked them 21. But one of the things is that, and we're going to say this up front, I love all these teams. I picked them for a reason. It's like asking me to rank my 32 favorite candy. Like, someone needs to be last,
Yeah.
And just because it's 32 doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that they aren't necessarily the best suited against these particular teams. There are many matchups where they're good, and the general feeling I was going for is rock, paper, scissors. But it's rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, Kirk, Picard,
Dynamite.
Dynamite. And that was the reaction that many people were getting, is that, they like, against certain pairings, this could be a really powerful team. And yes, that's 100% true. But when you look at the numbers, this is one where the numbers were determinant. The best vote they actually got was 20. If you just do a quick scan, most of the time, someone thought each team was at least a 10.
Right, which was just marginally better than what you ranked it at 21.
Right.
And only one person ranked it at 32 itself.
Right. So what you're seeing is that we don't necessarily hate this team, but no one is really gushing over them. So not only did they have the lowest total average, but there wasn't a lot of deviation. The total deviation on this was 31, compared to some of the other teams where the total deviation might be like in the 80s or 100. What everyone's saying is that no one hates this team, but no one loves them, and everybody's really close. So to me, that means that the average is pretty valid.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but again, someone needs to be 32. I still think they have a lot of intrigue going for them, but that's a tough spot to be in.
At number 31, Kung Fu Fighters Samurai matches two people, Bandit and Bobby, at 31. Nobody marked them as 32. Their best vote was a 7. And not really a high deviation on this one. Pretty consistently low, except for the one outlier of Savant.
Right. And obviously, people can really like a pairing, and you're going to see a lot of that. The difference is that it's not even close after that. So yes, it has the difference between that and Mountie Tornadoes is that it has a best vote of 7, but everyone else is above 20.
Yeah, so you take that outlier out,
right.
then it drastically drops.
Right, so the question is there something there that, is this the second coming of Kaiju Innsmouth? Because, and there's a lot that they can do that's interesting, but as I said when I did their video, I like this team and they have some really interesting plays, but they can only pick one of them. A lot of them revolve around expert timing. If they can get it back, they can do a lot of things. Against engine factions, they can be particularly oppressive. Do you remember how many times you whacked me with Ladle Whirlwind last year?
The one time I beat you with Kung Fu Fighting Dinosaurs? Yeah.
So like they have the potential to be oppressive, certainly, but against a lot of these fast factions, they're just not going to be able to keep up necessarily. Still, some intriguing things, a couple of trick plays. The thing that you pointed out about the deviation was that, yeah, even with that 7, there's not a lot of deviation there, which means that we're pretty consistent. They did decently well in the exhibition series as well, but they never won.
Right.
So
that's
it's like
a factor.
yeah, they deserve to be here, but again, someone's got to be on the lower scale of things. And this is another one where the math lined up mostly. They were actually originally seated at 30, but I swapped them for reasons we're going to talk about in the next video.
Okay. Number 30, Super Spies Penguins, which just reminds me of the penguin from Madagascar.
Right. I felt like this has to be some form of movie.
Yeah. So they're really great. You can play a lot of minions randomly from the top of your deck with the penguins, but the knowledge that the Super Spies can give you of looking at your top deck and seeing what is there can give you a little better chance than normal when using the penguins. They have a pretty consistent, I think originally you had them at 31 and then you swapped them out with Kung Fu Fighting Samurai, right?
Right. And the difference is because of the total deviation. So we have these numbers, you may not necessarily see them, but compare the total deviation, 46 for Kung Fu Fighting Samurai, 79 for Spy Penguins. So Blobbeed has them at 4, Turing Jedi has them at 11, and Chedorific has them at 18. Now, I have them at 29. I really like this team. They have some absolutely crazy upside. And in the exhibition series, I hit it. Like literally, you could not have scripted it better. And that was unfortunately against Turing Jedi, which is why he has them at 11.
So the expedition game affected the seeding, which would in a normal preseason.
And I'd love to move them down further, but the truth is that when people were discussing it, they're right, is that there's a very low chance of this happening. The magic already happened in the exhibition. What are the odds it's going to happen again? In this particular game, it actually got to be 12-4, and we just called it.
Wow.
Because like every base had 3 points on it. So it's like he's not going to score a base without me.
Yeah.
And ironically, the opponent for that game was Kung Fu Fighting Samurai.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that had no impact on the seed.
Okay.
They have some absolutely crazy plays. They have plays that can backfire. There's some interesting potential there. But ultimately, we talk a lot about floors and ceilings. Floor being, if everything goes the wrong way, what are you going to get? Ceiling being, if you hit all the upside and everything goes your way, what are you going to get? The floor can be pretty low. There could be some anti-synergies there. I think that's what the committee is seeing. I definitely recognize the potential, but even I gave them a 29, just because I felt like it's going to take a lot. The other thing about this team was that the committee was split. Both of these factions have titans, and the committee was split over which titan would be used over the course of the game.
Really?
Yeah, which makes me think that people would play the combination differently. I should have asked Blobbeed because he's the strongest believer. I should have asked him who he thought should be the driving tight end. Personally, I picked the spy tight end, and I feel like that gives them a big edge. And I also like the idea of they could investigate the opponent deck and then immediately kick that minion out of play. I think that's a big advantage. But a lot of people thought the Penguin tight end would be better. I honestly disagree there, but to me it's interesting because if there is the disagreement, it means that the team can be played in any number of ways, which makes them a very big wild card.
Yeah.
So that's Super Spy Penguins.
Number 29, Fairy Sharks. Do.
You don't want to know how many verses of that song actually exist.
I had to show that to my wife, and we just busted out laughing. I loved it. I would love to see the full song with that you made.
No. That's not even, the rest of the verses aren't written down. It's in my head. It dies with me.
But it really shouldn't. All right, so standard deviation on this one is pretty low on the 49 range. It looks like you have the best vote at 10 with Touring Jedi.
Right.
But other than that, it's pretty high and it deserves to be where it's at.
Well, there's a couple of, close to 20s. The thing about this play is that they have an incredible engine of renewable destruction. If you counter that, they get hurt a lot, and there are ways to counter that. But also, I feel like they could run out of plays. They have some good bursts, but once you use those, it
gets dead in the water.
Yeah, you're living up to your name. For me, the big exhibition game that I played with them was against Superhero Princesses, and I just couldn't touch them.
Yeah. They're too big. They're too strong.
And also, Eliza limiting the extra plays. Like I could make the plays to weaken them. Also, bases played a tremendous role in that game because House of Nine Lives, like if I killed them, they just get resurrected, and then a base came out that would let them move them off. So it's like I kill them, they get moved to the base moves them back off. I try and kill them again, they move back. It's like if the destruction gets countered in any way, they go down significantly. Glimmer is still great, but again, it relies a lot on board presence and not necessarily on burst. So if you can counter that as well, you could overtake them because they don't have a lot of specials.
All right, number 28, Ignoble Teddy Bears. This is potentially a very strong faction of a two-player. Ignoble is great. They bring in some particular bases that would be great not to win on.
Right.
So not always winning could work in their favor.
Especially with the Betrothed.
Right. And then as long as the other team doesn't have, control or destruction abilities, they can kind of dominate the game. Especially with the Teddy Bears, you can kind of destroy the biggest one on a good base and then let them all be on a bad base, on a ninja base, or a Winterfell base. But you marked them down as 32. Why?
It's the floor. And basically, it's the Ignobles have a two-state process. They have the giving of control and they have the taking of control, the reclaiming. If you get one or the other, but not both, they will be hurt. It's better to have the giving of control because you can get benefits and you can use that power against you, especially because their Titan lets you take control back and also gives power bonuses. I felt, what happens if you draw the worst Teddy Bears cards with the worst Ignoble cards, the taking back of control with the Snuggly Bears, just having one. If that's your starting hand, what do you do? I felt like they had the lowest floor, which is why I marked them at 32. And in the exhibition game that I played with them, they were against Kung Fu Fighting Samurai, which is a bad matchup to begin with. Kung Fu Fighting Samurai ran away with that game very quickly. My starting hand was activate the spy, Snuggly Bear, Sir Squeezes. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
It's like you draw two and call it a day. It's like I drew another Snuggly Bear. I drew Repaying Debts to give him away and draw two. It's like, so I felt the floor. Yeah, there is a lot of upside, and it's not necessarily a comfortable matchup because of the specials that you mentioned. They could always do something at the last second, and then they just have a very odd game plan that requires a different strategy. I'm just driving that based on the floor, but I'm also not the only one who thought that. Turing Jedi and Vesper both had them at 30. Deviation's probably pretty average at about 81, but no one thought they were better than 9. So hopefully it's not too much of an issue with them being the seed. And originally they were seeded at 25, but just objectively, when you were really comparing it against other things, they just needed to come down a little bit further, and they continued to slide. So they ended up at 28. It's not far off from 25, but that is an example where when you take a really critical look and say, okay, this or this one, teams start to move around.
Yeah. Number 29, Pirates, Giant Ants. This is another situation where there's 2 Titans, like Super Spy Penguins. Now, the question is, which Titan is more important? I played against this faction twice, and I saw both the Giant Ants and the Kraken get played in both games. And in both games, it was the right choice to make, although they did lose, so I don't know how accurate that statement is, but all things considered, it looked like the right move.
Right. So it was interesting because you were leading both of those games, and at that point, for the Giant Ants to win, they have to do the thing. By the way, that is the technical term in this tournament for the Infinite First Meet. It's doing the thing.
Yeah.
So the reason why I thought it was interesting, because a lot of people commented, will the Kraken get used? And I thought the answer was no. I think the answer might actually be yes early on, because it can be really hard for this team to get power counters out fast enough if they draw poorly, which means that if they start losing their guys to bases that they've lost, it's okay if they lose because they have the counters and they can come back with them. And so you saw the Kraken saving like a soldier with like just 2 counters, just because every counter matters. In my video, I was trying to do the math on how much they need, but when they're really only playing 1 minute in action most of the game, it's going to be hard to get to that point. There was an issue where the Kraken was actively blocking Death on 6 Legs at one point, but I still think that, yeah, bringing the Kraken out at that point was the right call. In the game where I played, they lost another exhibition game. In the game that I played, I don't remember the exact score. I feel like I was down by about 6. Because at one point, I just stayed off a base and said, you can have that base. If I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win big. So it's like it doesn't matter anymore. And it was really close. There happened to be Antarctic base against a Swarm faction, and it's like, okay, this is my chance. Like, I'm gonna build up power here. I did some crazy things over the course of the game, but it's like, do I have enough? Because I'm not at the 25 capacity. I'm at like the 20 mark, and then it's like, you know what? I got to go for it. Let's find out what happens. I did the thing, and then it's like moving from base. The bases are working out. There was a full sail play mixed in there anyway, which made it even easier to continue to go on. The final score was, I think, 37-19. Now, the fact that the other player got 19, like, shows you how hard it is for them to, because they were at 14 and they got an additional 5 points. This is hard to do. I ranked them at 18 because I counted 17 teams I would not want to play them against from a pure counter standpoint. But then you have to factor in the speed as well. You played Superhero Princesses, which can be a really fast deck.
And they didn't have enough time to get their counters out and all that other stuff.
Plus you had the destruction of the 2s. So that wasn't even something that I had necessarily thought that was going to be a counter. So that's why they just kept sliding. Originally, they were seated at 24, even though I marked them at 18, and I was okay with them being at 24. But then they just fell a little bit more to 27. They are still a threat. If they can pull off their thing, then the scores are going to be ridiculous. I would love to see something like infinity to 15 is what we're reporting out. But when you play them, you realize that against these teams in particular, it's really tough to do. So some people are like, how could you pick this? It's like, well, we're saying that they're the 27 seed and we're standing by it.
So when the Expedition games, I was breaking bases left and right. And Pirate Giant Ants actually came back up and tied me before I finally broke the final base without them scoring.
Right. And that's an interesting point, because we tend to get lost in the infinite first mate thing, is that they can still do things with lesser first mates and smaller wrecking balls. But that was not a case in the second game at all, which we did video and we'll be posting shortly.
Nice. Number 26, Magical Girls Russian Fairy Tales. That's a mouthful right there. All right, they have a little bit below standard at 70 deviation. No one really put them up too high. 9 with their best guess, best by Calvern. But no one ranked them the worst either. It's pretty interesting. I think it would be pretty interesting because Magical Girls could pull out key minions that you need back into play, the ones that that you critically need.
Yeah, this team is very annoying to play against. Very annoying. That doesn't mean that they win. It means that, like, sit down, get a stress ball. Like, this is gonna be interesting. Toad, and just recurring it over and over again. You have to assume that, like, if you have a faction that relies on any particular counters or attachments, and they're playing this team, kiss them goodbye. Mm-hmm. They can be really brutal to play against, but they're ultimately beatable because they have no specials other than Finist, and Finist is, you can see it coming a mile away. Mm-hmm. If you just do something big on your turn, you'll beat them. Thing is that they will prevent, if you have a 2-step play, they will make that very hard. If you can beat them all in one turn, you can beat them. It is not a fun matchup. They will hold their own. They overcame a 5-point deficit just because they screwed with me so hard. Because once they get their good minions out, they just keep playing them over and over again. You think with Lunar Captain that it's like, okay, it's going to take a while to get a bunch of minions. Nope. Like, Toad comes back instantly. The Birch will come back fairly quickly. It's not a fun matchup. So it's like you have to expect that you can't take any minion for granted. Like, they're not going to be there long.
Babushka! All right, number 25, Robots Vampires. So, they don't completely suck, but I know that was kind of a robotic answer there. They don't have too many. I mean, they got ranked 8 by Blackjack and number 9 by Bobley. Thoughts?
So I ranked them 15, and I was ultimately the one who kicked them down to 25. And there's a reason for that. This team has some absolutely incredible plays. This team has some absolutely terrible draw possibilities. Which do you get? When you played them, you got your alpha stolen on the first turn.
Yeah, right out the gate. And I was just like, there goes my strategy. They just tanked me for the rest of the game, and it was pretty brutal.
So I've played them, and I had the alpha in my starting hand, and they won. It was an easy route to victory, but they won. And then I've played them again where the alpha is nowhere to be found. I'm starting the game with 2 cards that can recur a minion of power 2 or less from the discard pile, and a bunch of fledgling vampires. I don't know why. Very often when I play vampires, I have the unbelievable ability to shuffle and get mostly vampires. Even when playing digitally, I don't get it. But if they don't draw well, they will be starved for a while. You will not play your actions because they have actions that recur from the discard pile. You're not going to play those early. You're going to want to wait to save your power counters for the Titan. You're not going to play those early. In the last game that I played last night from when we were recording this, I took 9 turns. I played 5 actions, one of which was their special. That's not good.
Yeah.
The funny thing about this is that I forgot to mention that there was a survey. Before we did the final seeds, we had an intermediate step where I did some manual adjustment, and then I asked people to vote on where they thought they were. One person said that they were 5 spots too low. One person said that they were 5 spots too high.
Which so they cancel each other out, and you're like, well, they went where they belong.
Well, not necessarily. It means that this team is incredibly swingy.
Yeah.
They have some very good plays, but if they can't enable those plays, it's going to be a long game. I think a lot of people think robots and think instant victory, but they don't necessarily make a bad faction better. And there are some very good vampire cards that combo with them, but you still have 50% bad vampire cards. So if you draw the 50% bad vampire cards, it's like there's not a lot they can do about it. Yeah. It actually feels even worse. So they can be frustrating to play. It feels very satisfying when you do what you want them to do, but objectively in the exhibition series, when the alpha was stolen, it's like that. There goes your payoff, your vampire actions. Like it's almost like he did you a favor by breaking that base. Like you're giving it back. And it should be worth noting that they were playing Mythic Horse. Sheep to the stealing, but it's like you don't give the alpha to Mythic Horses,
right?
Because everyone's like robot ponies are insane. It's like, yeah, well, even if you give the ponies the alpha by means of like a trade, then that's pretty brutal. So it's a shame. I don't like that I marked them 15 and they end up at 25, but I'm the one who ultimately put them there just because you do feel the floor, particularly on the action plays. So that's our first 8.
Right. So that's our first 8.
Who's the biggest surprise for you in the top 8?
Biggest surprise for you mean the bottom 8?
Yeah, the bottom 8.
Ignoble teddy bears. The fact that you even put them so low. The fact that they can manipulate power count or victory points. That's always a big thing. Now, granted, they're always susceptible to being destroyed or control being given back, or there's a lot of different factions that have that ability to do it and then move them around. So that really hinders the Ignobles, but what the Ignobles bring to it is not just their factions, but their bases. Yeah,
and I did factor that in. Winter Squashed is one of my favorite bases. I'm never comfortable about it. Later on, we're going to be talking about bases. Actually, let's talk about it now. Just why not?
Okay.
So, because you've been mentioning bases a lot. Bases make a tremendous impact on the game in unexpected ways. They can completely swing something at the last second. There's actually a funny story about that. How much do you remember when you were playing Mega Trooper Bear Cavalry versus Astro Knight Ninjas?
Oh my goodness. The bases were critical to that game. I had it in the bag. It was done. It was written off. So the opponent already counted it off as a loss, and then the bases turned around and it destroyed me.
So let's talk about the specifics. You're playing Bear Cavalry. You have General Ivan out on Tortuga, which is a 4-3-2 base. You're not going to break that base because you want to milk that. Completely shut down the ninjas.
Destruction ability.
Whatsoever.
They got Moon Dumpster.
No
moon came out. I just considered a dumpster fire.
The only way that General Ivan is coming out of play is if no moon blows him up. And there's a 50-50 shot, and it blows him up.
Yeah.
And then what base comes out? Cave of Shinies. It's like, can you get 1 VP before the ninjas get 3? No. And so the game was decided based on Cave of Shinies destruction. And that would have been a fantastic upset.
Yeah.
A lot of people were upset about that game. But literally, it's like the MVP of that game is No Moon in Cave of Shinies. Because Justin Jaker was lamenting the entire game, like, I can't touch you, I can't touch you.
And I felt like I was controlling the game, and I was controlling who was going where. I was moving people around to what bases. I'm like, hey, you're going to this base now, you're now to this base. And he was just like, all right, cool, thanks.
So base support is critical. And I could see it playing into the Ignoble teddy bears a lot. Tornado Mounties, they, as I mentioned in their video, they get a ton of linear bases, which is perfect because it's like, if I'm going to lose anyway, I'm going to spend the least amount on it and get the maximum amount of points. I also think bases will play a giant role in Pirate Giant Ants because the homeworld could bring out 7 counters very quickly with all the printed power. And the only reason why I won a game against Robot Vampires. Oh wait, I was in that game. Sorry. Yes, I'm the one who beat Robot Vampires. Well, there were a lot of games.
There was a lot of playtesting in this.
Yes, the only reason why I won that game is Mushroom Kingdom. Mushroom Kingdom comes out unexpectedly, and it's like, I'm gonna move your big guy over, and I'm gonna beat you 11-9 for 5 points. And the game, so Mushroom Kingdom is the MVP of that game. Otherwise, they would have had it. So again, when you're looking at the matchups, think very carefully about the bases that will come into play. We're using the standard base rule, so you know exactly what's going to be in the deck. You won't know what comes out, but you have to imagine that the wrong base coming out at the wrong time can completely create something unexpected. I'm so sorry that it's like, who played, like, oh yeah, I played them. I beat them, but I didn't, I'm the one who beat Robot Vampires, but again, full assist to Mushroom Kingdom on that one.
Now, to get a better idea about each of these factions, Jim put videos out on each one specifying their pros and cons and all that stuff. Look in the description below. We're going to have each faction with the link to that video in there so that you can easily reference those for your sake.
Yeah, we did the silhouettes to give people a chance to figure out who they thought it was. Some people were really accurate with them, some people were not, and it's funny, like, how do you see that from that? Yeah. But they'll be, by the time this video airs, they'll be updated so you know exactly what team you're looking for. So it'll say, like, you know, the Gauntlet #1, Kaiju Innsmouth, etc. So you know, you'll be able to find exactly what you're looking for.
Awesome.
All right, that's it for part 4. Let's shut it down.